In the late 16th century, a bold vision took shape in the heart of England. Queen Elizabeth I reigned, and the world was a chessboard of empires. Spain and Portugal were growing rich from the Americas, and England, ambitious and eager, wanted its own piece of the new world. This is where our story begins, with a man of great influence and even greater dreams, Sir Walter Raleigh. He was a courtier, a poet, a soldier, and an explorer, and he secured a royal charter to establish a colony in North America. His goal wasn't just about gold or spices. It was about planting the English flag permanently on American soil, creating a new England across the sea. This was more than an expedition. It was the dawn of an empire, a gamble that would forever be etched in history. In 1584, Raleigh sent his first ships not to settle but to scout. Captains Philip Amadas and Arthur Barlow led the voyage. They landed on the coast of modern-day North Carolina, on an island the local Algonquian people called Roanoke. What they found was a paradise. The soil was fertile, the waters teemed with fish, and the air was sweet with the scent of pine and grapes. Barlow's report back to Raleigh was glowing, painting a picture of a land of abundance and friendly natives. He wrote of the people being most gentle, loving, and faithful. Two local men, Manteo and Wanchese, even agreed to travel back to England with them. Their arrival in London caused a sensation, fueling the excitement and proving to Raleigh that his dream was within reach. The stage was set. The following year, they would return not just to visit, but to stay. The year is 1585. Filled with optimism, a fleet of 7 ships set sail from Plymouth, England, carrying over 100 men. This wasn't a scouting mission. This was the real thing. Their leader was Sir Richard Grenville, a cousin of Raleigh, and with him were soldiers, artisans, and a brilliant scientist named Thomas Harriot, tasked with documenting this new world. After a rough journey, they arrived at Roanoke Island. Immediately, they set to work, building a small fort and homes, a tiny English outpost surrounded by an immense, unknown continent. The initial days were filled with a sense of purpose and discovery. Harriet, along with the artist John White, began to meticulously study the local flora, fauna, and the culture of the Algonquian people. Their work would provide Europeans with the most detailed and humane glimpse into Native American life at the time. However, the initial harmony soon began to fray. The English colonists, mostly soldiers, were not farmers. They had expected to be supplied by ships from England and to trade for food with the local tribes. But as the weeks turned into months, the promised supplies dwindled. The colonists' metal goods were valuable, but their demand for food quickly strained the resources of the local Algonquian villages. Tensions began to simmer. A cultural misunderstanding over a silver cup, which the English believed was stolen, led to a brutal response. Grenville ordered the burning of an entire village and its cornfields. This single act of violence shattered the fragile trust that had been built. The gentle and loving people described by Barlow were now wary, and in some cases, openly hostile. The English found themselves isolated, their food stores dangerously low, in a land that was no longer welcoming. As the winter of 1585 approached, Sir Richard Grenville sailed back to England, promising to return with fresh supplies by the following spring. He left behind about 107 men under the command of Ralph Lane. The winter was harsh. The colonists, unprepared for the cold and unable to farm effectively, grew desperate. Their relationship with the surrounding tribes, led by Chief Wingina, deteriorated completely. Wingina, who had once been cautiously hospitable, now saw the English as a threat to his people's survival. He began to organize a coalition of tribes to drive the colonists out. Lane, sensing the danger, decided on a preemptive strike. In the spring of 1586, he and his men launched a surprise attack, killing Wingina. This act of aggression sealed their fate. They had made enemies of the very people they depended on. The dream of a permanent settlement was turning into a nightmare of starvation and conflict. Just as all hope seemed lost, a fleet of ships appeared on the horizon in June 1586. It was in Grenville with the promised supplies. It was the famed sea captain Sir Francis Drake returning from a series of raids against the Spanish in the Caribbean. He stopped at Roanoke to check on the colony and found the men utterly demoralized. They were starving, scared, and ready to give up. Lane and his colonists pleaded with Drake to take them home. Seeing their desperate state, Drake agreed. They abandoned the fort, packed what little they had, and sailed back to England. Ironically, Grenville's relief ship arrived just a few weeks later, only to find the settlement completely deserted. Unwilling to give up Raleigh's claim, Grenville left a small holding force of 15 men on the island, with enough supplies for 2 years before he too returned to England. The first attempt at an English colony in America had ended in failure. But Sir Walter Raleigh was not a man to give up easily. He believed the first colony failed because it was composed of soldiers, not families. A true settlement, he reasoned, needed men, women, and children people with a stake in building a new life, not just guarding a fort. So in 1587, a new expedition was launched. This time it was different. John White, the artist from the first voyage, was appointed governor. And among the 117 colonists were 17 women and 9 children. These were families, farmers, and craftsmen, ready to put down roots. Their plan was to sail to the Chesapeake Bay, a more sheltered and promising location scouted earlier. But their pilot, Simon Fernandez, had other ideas. Citing the lateness of the season, he refused to sail further north and forced the colonists to disembark at the same abandoned settlement on Roanoke Island. When they landed, they found the fort in ruins and the houses overgrown. There was no sign of the 15 men Grenville had left behind, only the scattered bones of a single man. It was a grim and unsettling welcome. Despite this, the colonists, with John White leading them, set about rebuilding. They repaired the houses and tried to re-establish friendly relations with the local tribes. They had some success with Manteo's tribe on the nearby CROATOAN island. Manteo himself was baptized and named Lord of Roanoke, the first and only peer of the realm created on American soil. But other tribes remained hostile, still remembering the violence of the previous year. Just days after their arrival, a colonist named George Howe was found dead, killed while crabbing alone. The fear was back. The colonists were once again isolated, living on a knife's edge in this vast, beautiful, and dangerous new world. Amidst the fear and hardship, a moment of profound hope occurred. On August 18, 1587, Eleanor Dare, the daughter of Governor John White, gave birth to a baby girl. They named her Virginia. Virginia Dare was the first English child born in the Americas. Her birth was a powerful symbol. She represented the future, a new generation that was not English, not native, but American. Her cries were the first of their kind in this new world, a testament to the colonists' determination to create a permanent home. For a brief moment, the birth of this child must have lifted everyone's spirits, a small miracle that promised a future for their struggling community. It was a tangible sign that their gamble might pay off, that a new society could, in fact, take root and flourish thousands of miles from home. But the colony was in dire need of supplies. The conflict with the local tribes meant they couldn't rely on trade, and their own provisions were running out fast. The colonists implored John White to return to England to plead their case for immediate aid. White was torn. He didn't want to leave his daughter, his newborn granddaughter Virginia, and the colony he was meant to govern. But he knew they would not survive the winter without help. Reluctantly, he agreed. Before he left, they established a plan. If the colonists had to move, they would carve their destination into a tree. If they were in distress, they would carve a Maltese cross above the name. With a heavy heart, John White sailed for England in late August 1587, promising to return as quickly as possible. He had no idea he was seeing his family and his colony for the very last time. John White arrived in England to find a nation in crisis. King Philip II of Spain was preparing to launch his invincible armada to invade England. Every available ship was being commandeered for the war effort. White's desperate pleas for a relief mission were lost in the patriotic fervor and panic. For 3 long years, he was trapped, unable to secure a ship to return to his family. Finally, in 1590, after the Spanish Armada had been defeated, he managed to hire passage on a privateering vessel. He arrived back at Roanoke on August 18, his granddaughter's 3rd birthday. As they approached the island, they saw smoke rising from the woods and sounded their trumpets, hoping for a reply. But only silence answered. When they went ashore, the settlement was gone. The houses had been dismantled, the area enclosed by a sturdy palisade. There were no signs of a battle, no bodies, no crosses carved anywhere. The only clue was a single word carved into a post: CROATOAN. What happened to the 117 men, women, and children of Roanoke remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Their story, a blend of ambition, hope, and tragedy, marks the fragile, haunting beginning of the English journey in America. Imagine stepping off a ship onto a new continent, a world teeming with both promise and peril. This was the reality for 115 Englishmen, women, and children in 1587, led by their governor, John White. They established a settlement on Roanoke Island, a sliver of land off the coast of what we now call North Carolina. This wasn't just an outpost. It was a new beginning, a town named the City of Raleigh. Among the settlers was White's own daughter, Eleanor, and his newborn granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the very first English child born in the Americas. Hopes were high, but the challenges were immense. They arrived too late in the season to plant crops, and their relationship with the local Native American tribes was tense from the start. They were an island of English folk in a vast unknown land, completely dependent on supplies from a motherland an ocean away. Just a few weeks after their arrival, the colony's leaders made a difficult decision. Their supplies were dwindling far faster than expected. Someone needed to sail back to England to gather more food, tools, and reinforcements. The colonists, fearful of the journey and the uncertainties ahead, refused to send anyone from their own ranks. The burden fell squarely on their governor, John White. It was a heart-wrenching choice. He had to leave behind his entire family, his daughter, his son-in-law, and his baby granddaughter. He promised them he would return, that he would be back with everything they needed by the following spring. As his ship pulled away from the shore in late August 1587, he watched the small figures of his loved ones and his colony shrink against the horizon, never imagining it would be the last time he would ever see them. White arrived back in England on the brink of war. The mighty Spanish Armada was preparing to invade, and Queen Elizabeth I had commanded that every available ship be commandeered for the defense of the realm. Suddenly, no vessel was permitted to make the perilous transatlantic voyage. White was trapped. He pleaded with officials. He petitioned Sir Walter Raleigh, the colony's wealthy patron. He did everything in his power to secure a ship, but it was no use. The war with Spain took precedence over a tiny, distant settlement. Spring of 1588 came and went. The promised return date passed, and still, White was stuck in England, his heart heavy with worry. He could only imagine the fear and desperation growing in his colony as they waited for a ship that would not arrive. 1 year stretched into 2, and then into 3. 3 long silent years. For John White, it must have been an agonizing torment. Every sunrise brought a fresh wave of anxiety, every sunset a deeper despair. Were they still alive? Had they run out of food? Did they manage to make peace with the local tribes, or had conflict erupted? He knew the dangers they faced: starvation, disease, and potential hostilities. The silence from across the Atlantic was deafening, a void filled only by his worst fears. His family, his people, were completely alone. The war raged on, consuming all of England's resources and attention. The fate of 115 souls in the New World became a forgotten footnote in the grand drama of European conflict. White's desperation grew with each passing day, his personal mission to save his colony becoming an obsession against impossible odds. Finally, in 1590, the war with Spain subsided enough for a ship to be arranged. White managed to hire a privateering expedition, essentially government-sanctioned pirates, to take him back to Roanoke, promising them a share of any treasure they might find. After a long and difficult voyage, they approached the island on August 18th, which happened to be his granddaughter Virginia Dare's 3rd birthday. As they neared the shore, White's heart pounded with a mix of hope and dread. They fired their cannons and played English folk songs on trumpets, hoping for a response. But only silence answered back. When they landed, they found the settlement completely empty. The houses had been carefully dismantled, not violently destroyed. There were no signs of a struggle, no bodies, no graves. It was as if the entire colony had simply vanished. Then, carved into a wooden post of the fort's palisade, they found a single cryptic clue: the word CROATOAN. This was the pre-arranged signal. White had instructed the colonists that if they had to move, they should carve their destination into a tree or post. If they were in distress, they were to add a Maltese cross. There was no cross. CROATOAN was the name of a nearby island, now called Hatteras Island, and it was the home of a friendly Native American tribe. It seemed to be a clear message: we moved to CROATOAN Island. White was relieved. His people were alive, they had just relocated. But his relief was short-lived. A powerful storm was brewing, and the captain of the ship refused to risk his vessel in the treacherous waters around CROATOAN. His crew was anxious to get back to the more profitable business of privateering. Despite White's desperate protests, the ship turned around and headed back to England. John White never had the money or the means to return to America again. He died years later, never knowing what became of his family and the Lost Colony. The word CROATOAN was the final haunting message, a single word that has fueled one of America's most enduring and heartbreaking mysteries for over 400 years. What happened to the people of Roanoke? Did they assimilate with the CROATOAN tribe? Did they attempt to sail back to England and get lost at sea? Or did some other fate befall them? We may never know for sure. The story of Governor John White and his lost colony remains a powerful reminder of the sacrifices, the hopes, and the profound mysteries that lie at the very beginning of America's story. Imagine sailing across the vast, unforgiving Atlantic for months, your heart pounding with anticipation. You're finally returning to your family, to the new home you helped build in a new world. This was John White's reality in August 1590. 3 years earlier, he had left over 100 settlers, including his own daughter and granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas, on Roanoke Island. He was supposed to return with supplies within a year, but war and misfortune delayed him. When his ship finally dropped anchor, a heavy silence greeted them. Not the cheerful sounds of a bustling colony, but an eerie, unsettling quiet. As White and his men stepped ashore, their calls into the empty air were swallowed by the dense woods. The settlement was gone, completely vanished. The houses were dismantled, not burned or torn down, but carefully taken apart. There were no bodies, no bones, no signs of a battle or a struggle. It was as if the entire colony, more than 100 men, women, and children, had simply evaporated. A desperate search began. Where could they have gone? There was no trail, no message, nothing to explain the mass disappearance. The whole area was a ghost town, a chilling monument to a lost community. Then they saw it. Carved deep into a wooden post of the fort's palisade was a single, cryptic word. CROATOAN, just that. No other explanation. No cross, the prearranged signal for distress. Just that one word, hanging in the air like a ghost. CROATOAN was the name of a nearby island, now known as Hatteras Island, and also the name of the Native American tribe that lived there. It seemed like a clear clue. The colonists must have relocated there, perhaps seeking refuge or a better location. Hope surged through White. He had to get to CROATOAN Island. He had to find his family. But as they prepared to set sail, the sky turned dark. A furious storm, a hurricane, descended upon them, lashing their ships with violent winds and monstrous waves. The anchor cables snapped. The fleet was nearly driven onto the shore. Beaten and battered, with supplies dwindling and the weather showing no mercy, the sailors refused to risk the dangerous journey to CROATOAN. The captain made the heart-wrenching decision to turn back. They had to abandon the search and return to England. John White never saw his family again. He died without ever knowing what became of his daughter, his granddaughter, or the lost colony of Roanoke. The single word, CROATOAN, remains the only real clue. Did the colonists peacefully integrate with the CROATOAN people? Did they attempt to sail home and get lost at sea? Or did something far more mysterious happen? To this day, the fate of the Roanoke settlers is one of America's oldest and most haunting unsolved mysteries. In the late 16th century, a bold dream took root on the shores of the New World. In 1587, over 100 English settlers, led by Governor John White, established a colony on Roanoke Island, a sliver of land off the coast of modern-day North Carolina. They sought a new beginning, a life of opportunity far from the crowded streets of London. Among them were families, farmers, and artisans, including Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. But this dream would soon curdle into one of history's most enduring mysteries. Governor White sailed back to England later that year to secure much-needed supplies. However, his return was catastrophically delayed by a naval war with Spain. When he finally set foot on Roanoke Island again in 1590, 3 long years had passed. He expected a bustling, thriving settlement. Instead, he found an eerie silence. The colonists' houses had been carefully dismantled, not violently torn down. The entire settlement was gone. All 117 men, women, and children had vanished without a trace. The only clue left behind was a single word carved into a wooden post: CROATOAN. A second, shorter carving, CRO, was found on a nearby tree. What did it mean? Where did everyone go? For over 400 years, historians, archaeologists, and amateur sleuths have grappled with these questions, piecing together a story with no final chapter. The most prominent theory, and the one that seems to be directly suggested by the colonists themselves, is assimilation. Before his departure, Governor White had agreed upon a signal with the settlers. If they had to leave Roanoke Island due to danger, they were to carve a Maltese cross above their new location. No cross was found. The word CROATOAN was the name of a nearby island, now known as Hatteras Island, and also the name of a friendly Algonquian tribe that lived there. Could the colonists have simply packed up and moved to live with their native allies? This idea isn't just wishful thinking. It's supported by tantalizing clues that have trickled down through the centuries. Later English explorers and settlers in the Carolinas, like John Lawson in the early 1700s, reported encountering Native Americans with strikingly European features. They spoke of people with gray eyes and lighter hair who claimed their ancestors were white people. Some even told stories of being able to read from a book, a skill taught to them by these long-lost relatives. The CROATOAN people themselves had oral traditions that spoke of their ancestors being joined by a group of English settlers. The carving wasn't a cry for help. It was a message, a signpost pointing to where they had gone. It suggests a peaceful merging of two cultures, a story not of loss, but of adaptation and survival in a new world. The Roanoke colonists may not have vanished at all. Perhaps they simply became part of the land in a way they never expected. But a more sinister possibility has always shadowed the story of the Lost Colony. While the CROATOAN tribe was known to be friendly, not all of their neighbors were. Tensions between the English and other local tribes, like the CROATOAN, had been high even before the 1587 colony was established. An earlier English expedition had clashed violently with the natives, creating a legacy of mistrust and animosity. Some historians believe the colony was not peacefully relocated, but violently annihilated. The argument for this theory centers on the precarious position of the settlers. They were isolated, far from any English support, and potentially seen as invaders encroaching on ancestral lands. A surprise attack by a hostile tribe could have easily overwhelmed the small settlement. Proponents of this theory suggest that the dismantled houses were a sign of a systematic raid, with the attackers salvaging valuable materials like nails and timbers. And what of the colonists? They could have been killed in the attack or taken captive, their fates sealed far from the watchful eyes of history. The absence of bodies or signs of a struggle at the fort could mean the attack happened elsewhere, perhaps while the colonists were foraging or farming. This theory paints a grim picture of the colony's final days, ending not in peaceful union, but in bloodshed and terror, a stark warning of the dangers that lurked in this unfamiliar land. There is a third, equally compelling theory, one born not of human conflict, but of a desperate struggle against nature itself. The Roanoke colonists were pioneers, but they were also unprepared for the harsh realities of North American life. They arrived too late in the season to plant successful crops, leaving them heavily dependent on supplies from England, supplies that, as we know, were delayed for 3 critical years. Could the colony have simply starved? Scientific evidence lends significant weight to this idea. By studying the growth rings of ancient trees in the region, scientists have discovered that the Roanoke colony was established during one of the most severe droughts in over 800 years. This mega-drought would have made farming nearly impossible. Corn would have withered in the fields, and the surrounding forests would have offered little sustenance for hunting. The local native tribes, who had deep knowledge of the land, would have struggled themselves, making them less likely or able to share their own dwindling resources. Faced with starvation and disease, the colonists might have made a desperate decision. Perhaps they broke up into smaller groups, scattering into the wilderness in a frantic search for food and water, their social structure collapsing under the immense pressure of survival. In this scenario, there was no single catastrophic event, but a slow, agonizing decline. The dismantled settlement wasn't a sign of a planned move, but of a community falling apart, each family fending for itself until none were left. For centuries, the mystery of Roanoke was debated with little physical evidence beyond the initial carvings. But in recent years, archaeology has begun to shed new light on the puzzle. Excavations on Hatteras Island, the ancestral home of the CROATOAN people, have unearthed a fascinating array of late 16th century European artifacts. Items like a German stoneware jug, the hilt of an English rapier, and a lead tablet used for writing have been found mixed in with native pottery and tools. This archaeological evidence strongly suggests that at least some of the Roanoke colonists did, in fact, make their way to the island. It aligns perfectly with the CROATOAN carving, However, it doesn't solve the entire mystery. Was it the entire colony that moved, or just a small group? Did they go there to live peacefully, or did they arrive as refugees fleeing disaster? These findings support the assimilation theory, but don't entirely disprove the others. It's possible that a combination of events occurred. Perhaps the colony, weakened by drought and starvation, decided to move to CROATOAN, but a portion of the group was attacked along the way or chose a different path. The discovery of these artifacts doesn't provide a neat conclusion. Instead, it adds a new layer of complexity, pulling us deeper into the heart of the enigma. The ground beneath Hatteras Island may hold the key, but for now, it only offers more questions. So, what truly happened to the Lost Colony of Roanoke? Were they absorbed into a friendly native tribe, their bloodlines continuing in the people of the Outer Banks? Were they the victims of a brutal attack, their dream of a new life extinguished by violence? Or did they succumb to the unforgiving forces of nature, their numbers dwindling from starvation and disease until no one was left? Each theory is plausible, supported by its own set of clues, from cryptic carvings and archaeological finds to climate data and oral traditions. Perhaps the truth is a tapestry woven from threads of all three possibilities. The colonists, weakened by a devastating drought, may have decided to seek refuge with the CROATOAN people, only for some to be attacked or splinter off along the way. The story of Roanoke is so compelling because it remains unsolved. It is a historical cold case where the witnesses are long gone and the evidence is scattered by time and tide. The fate of those 117 souls remains a ghost story written into the very landscape of America, a haunting reminder that the past doesn't always give up its secrets easily. The name Roanoke will forever echo with the mystery of their disappearance, leaving us to wonder and to search for answers that may never be found. In the late 1500s, over 100 English men, women, and children vanished from an island off the coast of North Carolina, leaving behind almost no trace. All that remained was a single cryptic word carved into a post, CROATOAN. For over 400 years, this puzzle has captivated us. What happened to the Lost Colony? Were they attacked? Did they succumb to disease or starvation, or did something even stranger occur? Today, we're diving deep into the fog of history to explore one of America's most enduring enigmas. We'll look at why this story isn't just a historical footnote, but a foundational myth that shaped the very psyche of a nation. Let's journey back to 1587. England, eager to establish a foothold in the New World and challenge the might of Spain, sponsored a new colonial venture led by Governor John White. This wasn't just a military outpost, it was meant to be a permanent English settlement. Among the colonists was White's own daughter, Eleanor Dare, who gave birth to Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. It was a symbol of hope, a sign that a new English life could blossom across the Atlantic. But supplies quickly ran low. The colonists, struggling to survive in an unfamiliar land, urged John White to return to England for help. He reluctantly agreed, leaving behind his family and the entire community. He promised to return as soon as possible, but fate had other plans. When he set sail, England was on the brink of war with Spain, culminating in the famous battle against the Spanish Armada. Every available ship was commandeered for the war effort, stranding White in England. 3 long, agonizing years passed before he could finally secure a ship and make the treacherous journey back to Roanoke. Imagine his anticipation, his fear. As he approached the island in August of 1590, he expected to hear the sounds of a bustling village, to see smoke rising from chimneys, to be reunited with his family. Instead, he found only silence. The settlement was gone. The houses had been carefully dismantled, not violently destroyed. There were no signs of a struggle, no bodies, no graves. It was as if the entire colony had simply evaporated. The only clues were the word CROATOAN carved into the palisade fence and the letters CRO etched into a nearby tree. CROATOAN was the name of a nearby island, now known as Hatteras Island, and also the name of a local Native American tribe friendly to the English. The colonists had pre-arranged this signal with White. If they had to leave, they would carve their destination. If they were in distress, they would add a Maltese cross. There was no cross. This suggested they had left willingly, relocating to CROATOAN Island. So why didn't John White go and find them? A powerful storm was brewing, his crew was anxious to leave, and he was forced to sail away, never to return to America. He would die without ever knowing the fate of his family and his colony. This is where the story fractures into countless theories. The most straightforward explanation is that the colonists did exactly what the clue suggested. They moved to CROATOAN Island and assimilated with the local population. For centuries, this theory has been supported by tantalizing oral traditions from the Lumbee people of North Carolina, many of whom have English surnames and claim descent from the Roanoke colonists. They speak of ancestors who could read from a book and who had gray eyes, a feature noted by early explorers. This idea transforms the narrative from one of tragic loss to one of survival and adaptation. Maybe they weren't lost at all, but instead chose to become part of a new community, a new world. But other, darker theories persist. One suggests they attempted to sail back to England on their own and were lost at sea. Another posits that they were attacked and wiped out by a hostile tribe, perhaps at the instigation of the Spanish who saw them as a threat. Some even point to evidence of a severe drought that plagued the region at the time, arguing that starvation and disease simply overwhelmed them, forcing the survivors to scatter in desperate search of food and water. The Roanoke mystery didn't just create a legend. It had a profound psychological impact on England's next attempt at colonization. Jamestown, founded in 1607. The specter of Roanoke haunted the Jamestown settlers. Their early years were filled with paranoia and a deep-seated fear of the unknown wilderness and its native inhabitants. They were acutely aware that an entire colony before them had disappeared without a trace. This fear fueled a more aggressive, and often brutal, approach to dealing with local tribes, a stark contrast to the initial, more diplomatic intentions at Roanoke. The failure of Roanoke served as a harsh lesson. The New World was not a Garden of Eden, but a place where survival was a constant, desperate struggle. It shaped the English colonial mindset to be more militaristic, more fortified, and less trusting. So where do we stand today? For centuries, the search for answers was limited to historical accounts and speculation. But now, modern science is breathing new life into this cold case. Archaeologists are using ground-penetrating radar and sophisticated soil analysis to unearth new clues. In recent years, they have found shards of 16th-century English pottery and other artifacts not just on Roanoke Island, but on Hatteras Island and at sites further inland. These discoveries suggest the colonists may have split up into smaller groups and moved to different locations, trying to integrate with various native communities. And then there's the promise of DNA, the Lost Colony DNA. Project is attempting to trace genetic links between living descendants of the CROATOAN and other local tribes, and potential relatives of the colonists back in England. By comparing Y chromosomes and mitochondrial DNA, researchers hope to find a genetic echo of the Roanoke settlers among modern populations. While it's a monumental task, a successful match would provide the first concrete biological proof of what happened to them. It could finally confirm that the colonists survived by becoming part of the American landscape in the most fundamental way possible. So, was Roanoke a failure? Or was it something else entirely? Perhaps the story of the Lost Colony isn't about disappearance, but about transformation. It challenges our very ideas of identity and survival. The colonists arrived as English subjects, but they may have ended their days as members of a Native American family. They didn't build an English town, but their children and their children's children may have become part of a new blended people, a story woven into the fabric of America itself. The mystery of Roanoke endures because it speaks to our deepest fears of the unknown and our greatest hopes for survival. It's a reminder that history is not always a clear and simple record of events. Sometimes it's a ghost story, a puzzle, a legend waiting to be told. The colonists vanished from the pages of English history, only to reappear in American folklore, their story a haunting echo that still resonates today. What do you think happened to them? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy exploring the great mysteries of history, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the past. See you next time.